Good morning to everyone. Sorry for the little delay. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. I'm Jayakumar, Regional Hydrologist for Sub-Saharan Africa. I'll just moderate this opening session and provide you a short brief on this initiative. Just for your information, for our meeting today, we have simultaneous interpretation between English and French. So participants can select their preferred language from the bottom of the screen. Just to brief on this initiative, which we are organizing the meeting today, as we are all aware, UNESCO is devoted to engaging with youth as a leaders, knowledge holders, and innovators in water sector. One of the main ways of doing so is by encouraging youth to become more involved in research, development, innovation, enterprises, and partnership that addresses water security issues in Africa. Africa is one of the UNESCO's 2 global priorities, and water security is most essential for achieving SDGs, as well as it's one of the major intergovernmental programs within UNESCO. Within this context of Africa Water Week, UNESCO partnered with International Science Council Regional Office for Africa and AMCAO, the African Ministers' Council on Water, to bring youth's participation in water security of Africa. During 7th Water Week in 2018, UNESCO joined with the partners in organizing the Youth Forum at Africa Water Week in Gabon. And we are expecting to continue the same in the 8th Africa Water Week, which will be organized in Namibia, either later this year or next year. This year, we thought, we can do a little different so that, we can get youth researchers and innovations to be reflected in a way that, it could be beneficial to the societies. The main objective of the initiative is to improve the visibility of scientific contribution of youth that addresses water-related challenges in Africa, to contribute advancing and addressing knowledge gaps on water security issues in Africa, with focus on experience of youth and young professionals, and encourage the use of knowledge generated by youth to improve a policy process and governance in water sector. The current workshop, what we are having it today, the main objective is to provide information on scientific writing and manuscript preparation for the youth. What we did is that, we did call for an abstract from all the youth from South African continent. We received almost like 120, out of which we selected 50 extended abstracts, in which we are organizing the workshop for all the selected participants to write the full manuscript of the research paper, which will be again subjected to peer review. And we'll select 25 extended abstracts, full papers, which will be published as a special publication during the Africa Water Week, as well as the World Water Forum. And and also we are trying to facilitate the networking and collaboration between the experts, youth, and young professionals. And today, we have the topmost policymakers from UNESCO, AMCAO, and International Science Council with us. So without any further delay, we shall start the opening ceremony. And with this, I'm privileged to introduce the guest of honors today with us, Madam Shamila, the Assistant Director General of Natural Sciences, Madam Gabriela, the Assistant Director General of Social and Human Sciences, Madam Antares, our Regional Director for UNESCO Eastern Africa, Mr. Daniel, Regional Director for International Science Union, Regional Office for Africa. And we also have Mr. Canisius, the Executive Secretary of Africa Ministers Council on Water, AMCAO. So with this short introduction, I'm privileged to invite Madam Antares to open the meeting.
Morning and okay, yeah. Thank you very much, Jaya, and good morning to our 2 ADGs, Madam Shamila and Gabriela, and to our partners from AMCAO and the International Science Union. It's my pleasure to have you with us. I wouldn't say so many things in so many words because I am between this meeting and another that I should moderate in a few minutes. Mine is the pleasure to welcome you and to underscore the importance of capacity building of our young people. Just a couple of days ago, or maybe a week ago, we had a meeting where the young people themselves have asked that they be given the skills and the resources to be able to engage. And it was in no other area than in disaster risk reduction. But more important also is their understanding and knowledge of water management, water sources, and how to really, especially in crisis or situations like these, be able to contribute to ensuring that some of the measures which really included the use of water is well communicated. So I would not really want to belabor the point of the importance of water. We know how in the future, as has always been predicted, the next war would be as a result of the scarcity of water. And so therefore, the work that UNESCO is doing is so very critical. And as we go forward, we must always remember the demographic dividend of the young people and involve them to increase their education, to increase their knowledge, skills, and the values that would help to build sustainable peace. So all what we do contributes to that peace we espouse. And so I want to welcome you all again. The 2 ADGs is also a sign of intersectorality, where science is looking across to social and human sciences, and there is also the element of one of the core business of UNESCO, engaging at the level of international cooperation and partnership to ensure that what we want to do in response to how we do it by bringing everybody together. I wish you all a very fruitful session. I unfortunately won't be there to listen to the brilliant remarks, but I will follow the recording. And I wish the young people, best of luck. This is their era. If there is going to be change, it's not going to be made by the adults. It's the young people that can bring about this change. And we can only accompany you along with giving you the requisite knowledge base, the skills, and opportunity for you to be able to engage at the highest level possible. On that note, I want to thank you. I want to thank my team. Jaya, please, I will come in whenever I can, as soon as I'm done with this next assignment. I'm sorry, dear ADGs, and have a good day. Bye.
Yeah, thank you very much, Antares, for your continued support and to all our initiative, especially whatever we do with the youth and young community with regard to water sector or biodiversity. Thank you very much once again for your kind support. Now I would like to invite Mr. Daniel to give his opening statement from ICSU side.
Thank you, Jaya, and thank you, the DGs. We are very happy to be part of this project, and we are looking at a situation where Africa as a continent is faced with a storm, where we have two significant developmental challenges, which involve supporting rapid growth and also preparing the climate change. The success of Africa on these issues depend on the capacity to provide and protect sustainable access to potable water, which has increasingly been becoming an issue of concern at local level, international level, even transboundary scale. It's becoming an issue. Water security has drawn a number of leaders at continental level and at global level. And if you look into the Agenda 2030, we'll see that the goal number 6 seeks to ensure access to water and sanitation for all. And if we come to Africa, we look at Agenda 2060. We'll see that water security is one of the priorities for the first 10 years of that agenda. And the International Science Council at global level and at regional level, we seek to convene scientific expertise and resources essential for catalyzing, incubating, coordinating impactful international action on issues of major scientific importance and major public importance. And the activities of the International Science Council, they are being driven by the action plan, which is a 3-year plan from 2019 and 2021. And this plan intends to allow flexibility in responding to new and emerging opportunities to adapt to ongoing strategic reflections and development. And the planned activities of the council, we've got 4 domains, and 2 of these 4 domains of impact are modeled around Agenda 2030 and around the evolution of science and science systems. One of the aspects which is inherent in the ISC implementation plan is the involvement of young scientists, as well as the development of their capacity to use science and innovation to address the future socio-economic developmental challenges. And if we come back to Africa and look at the planning for the transformation of Africa's future, especially on water security, it will not be complete if it's not modeled around the engagement of young scientists, build their capacity to conceptualize and roll out high-impact, transdisciplinary, transboundary research projects that will address continental priorities. The young professionals have to develop skills in order to communicate the generated knowledge, and which will lead to informed decision-making processes and implementation processes at regional, national, and even sub-national level. Efforts, we should have efforts made to improve the visibility of the contribution the young scientists and the young professionals are doing to address water challenges in Africa, and recognize what they are doing at all levels. And mechanisms need to be put in place to increase the young professionals' exposure and inspire them to become more involved in the co-production, co-design, co-application, implementation, and co-application of the knowledge. Now, the International Science Council Regions of Africa encourages support and supports initiatives like the one we have now, where we look out for what the young scientists are doing. We put it in open, and we seek the people to see what's happening in Africa and what the engagement of the young scientists. We believe that until lions have their own historians, the tales of the hand will always glorify the hunter. So we want our young professionals in water security to actually come to the challenge and cement their position as major beneficiaries and partners in the implementation of regional strategies, global strategies, through multidisciplinary research, development, and innovation, while facilitating network, partnership, and collaboration. So we look forward to to engaging in this initiative and beyond this initiative. Thank you so much, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much, Daniel. I mean, we value your support and partnership in all our initiatives, whatever we are doing it in Pan-African level. Thank you very much once again. I'm privileged to invite Mr. Canisius, the Executive Secretary of UMCAO, to deliver his opening remarks. Just to let you know that, I mean, for UNESCO, in anything related to water for Africa, UMCAO is our natural partner, and UMCAO is our one of the main ally with regard to water security in Africa. Mr. Canisius, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jaya. And yeah, thank you, UNESCO, for organizing this very important workshop. Madam Shamila, the Assistant Director General for Science, Natural Sciences in UNESCO, Madam Anne-Therese, Mr. Nyanganyura, distinguished participants, dear youth, ladies and gentlemen. I wish first of all to congratulate the youth for having manifested this interest and having successfully worked on their drafts on water security in Africa. I think it is a very commendable thing. A recent report by the SDG Center for Africa revealed that minimal progress has been made, and in some instances, there is stagnation. The center's focus show that all African regions except North Africa are unlikely to meet SDGs. At only 10 years to the SDGs horizon of 2030, the time is for action, for accelerated actions. It is time to put to use all the forces we have to this task. Most of time, women and the youth have been, I would say, not given enough space to exert their talent and use their strength to contribute to the development agenda of our continent. I think the time is now to give them enough space, to give them the opportunity to sharpen their skills and contribute optimally to push forward the agenda that Africa has. As you all know, 42% of the global population is aged below 25. And that for Africa is even higher, 60%. Africa is the youngest continent. That is a great thing, but it is a great thing only if the youth is well educated, well skilled, and empowered. It is a strength if we open opportunities for them to be useful, to contribute to the development and fulfill their own dreams. We need to invest heavily in our youth if we are to reap the dividend of the human capital in Africa. That is why UNESCO and AMCA have in their strategic documents a focus on the youth, to empower the youth, to build the capacity of the youth and give more and more space. This slow progress that is made by Africa in attaining the SDGs, including the SDG 6 on water and sanitation, is due to many reasons. And one of them is that we don't have enough capacity. We don't have a critical mass of skilled people. We don't have an adequate flow of knowledge and information. And the data on African resources is still very much scanty. So that is probably one of the critical areas where we need to work if we want to really take off and enable Africa to harness all the potential that we have. The exercise that we are opening today, I think it is very critical because it comes to respond to that need. To that need of putting together the youth to develop the skills so that they can be writing the knowledge, creating the knowledge that we need on water, on sanitation and other areas of our agenda. That is very important. That will correct the current situation where we see that most of the works, consultancies are done by people coming from outside Africa. It is good in terms of cooperation, but it's more expensive and probably not, certainly not very much a sustainable trend. We need to build that capacity so that we can be able to work with others on a peer-to-peer level and then be able to maintain the level of those activities by sustained activities. Building our capacity is of our paramount importance. And also, we need to be among the creators of knowledge. And without writing, or writing at minimum level like what we see currently in Africa, will not help us achieve that agenda. The youth, you have a responsibility to make that change, which will certainly enable Africa to sit in the driving seat and lead its own developmental agenda. And if we do that, then we will be able to create the Africa that we need, with all the commitments that our leadership have taken, be it in Sharm el-Sheikh on water security, be it on Go on sanitation issues, be it on in the SDGs, where we committed a number of things with other global leaders. I wish to conclude by commending again the youth for the initiative they have taken and the steps already done. By commending very much UNESCO for the role they have played in organizing this workshop, and also to thank you again for this fruitful cooperation with AMCAL on different aspects of capacity building, not only for the youth, but also for on-the-job training and other knowledge creation efforts. I wish to pledge to the youth that AMCAL will be very happy to continue supporting your effort on this activity, but also on other capacity building activities, which will be meant to build your potential and enable you to take the seat which is yours. And I thank you, ADG, for your presence and your support. It is a great thing. Thank you, and have a very fruitful workshop.
Thank you very much, Dr. Canisius. I mean, we would like to extend our heartfelt thanks to AMCAL. Always, whenever we come up with any initiative, you are there to support us when we deal with African countries. Thank you very much once again for your kind support. I would like to pledge that it's not only the science sector. Now we are also bringing the social and human science sector, where the youth focal coordination is there. So we are willing to contribute as at the level, I mean, which you expect us to do it. Thank you very much once again for your kind words. I would like to invite now Madam Shamila to give her special address on water security in Africa from the science perspective. Shamila, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jaya. Can you hear me? Yes?
We can hear
Yes,
you.
we can hear you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's loud and clear.
Thank you very, very much, Jaya. And ladies and gentlemen, experts, good morning to all of you. It really gives me great pleasure to address you here today in the presence of such esteemed experts and colleagues on the subject of water security in Africa and the role of youth. This online writers workshop is an extremely important event to build capacity in Africa. Dear colleagues, dear Gabriela Ramos, our Assistant Director General for the Social and Human Sciences, UNESCO, dear Anne-Therese Ndong-Jata, our Director of the UNESCO Regional Office for Eastern Africa, Nairobi, Kenya, dear partners, Dr. Canisius Kanangire, Executive Secretary of an extremely important partner for us in Africa, the African Ministerial Council on Water, AMCAL, dear Daniel Nyangura, Regional Director of IC Regional Office for Africa, dear youth, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, authors, good morning to all of you. It's really a great pleasure to welcome you to UNESCO. Colleagues, we have just heard the number of people in Africa in terms of youth, almost 60%, the youngest continent in the world. So what can we do? In sub-Saharan Africa, only 24% of the population have access to safe drinking water. How can we support this initiative of online writers dialogue to increase the capacity to harness the science and to ensure that when we come back in 2 or 3 years' time, we can move the needle from 24% of the population having access to safe drinking water to perhaps 50% of the population. Is this tenable? Is this doable? Yes, everything is possible today. We have to ensure that those 28% who have basic sanitation in Africa is increased to much higher than it is today. Dear colleagues, achieving global water security can only be possible if we can promote scientific knowledge and sharing of the science of water. And that is what UNESCO is all about. Water security today, as we've heard, is one of the greatest challenges of our time, particularly in this global pandemic where water is essential for households, hospitals, and even simply for washing our hands. We have seen now that the water, energy, food ecosystem nexus is inextricably linked and central to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And yet in Africa, agriculture is the main activity which has major social economic impact and is the largest consumer of world's freshwater resources. Hence, we need to work together to ensure that agriculture in Africa is able to benefit from freshwater resources, but also to manage it sustainably, because this is with the fabric of Africa's development. Africa is the center of those global challenges today for various reasons. Africa is also a priority for UNESCO. It's not only a priority globally because of the challenges it faces, but because of its resources and its potential, its natural resources and its resources in terms of people, you, the youth in Africa. And you can make a transformation in the region, as our dear colleague Anne Therese has highlighted earlier on. The history of Africa speaks of the strength and the resilience of its people. But the history of Africa also speaks about how it can use knowledge, technology, and innovation to advance its cause of development. And we count on working with you to ensure that we are able to provide, really, in this time of adversity, new interdisciplinary solutions. And that is why we have mobilized the Assistant Director General for social sciences at UNESCO to bring on board also the social dimension, the economic dimension, and the role of youth in contributing to accessing water, to managing water sustainably, and to promoting water management through science. It is a good timing for us also to partner with the International Science Council, the regional office, but especially the African Ministers' Council on Water. And you're all aware, we have issued the extended abstracts for youth and water security in Africa earlier this year. And we hope that the youth, the young professionals, the experts worldwide will be motivated and curious to use science to address water-related challenges in Africa and to explore the impact of water challenges on youth and women in Africa. Dear colleagues, science has changed the course of our way. It has fired our imaginations. Science is mankind's greatest enterprise. We have to empower our youth today to use science to address water challenges in Africa. And we need to encourage the intergenerational dialogue to build a partnership with the youth, but to empower them, to transmit to them the knowledge we have today so that science can be used for society in Africa and to ensure that no one is left behind. Science plays a major role in the survival of humanity. That's why we at UNESCO are also promoting the concept of open science to ensure no one is left behind, to reduce the knowledge gap among and between societies, and between communities and between countries. So let's reduce the knowledge gap of the youth as well. Let's promote open science, that they have access to science and technology, to promote safe water, to promote access to water and sanitation in Africa. Dear colleagues, the UN launched what is called UN SDG 6 Accelerator Framework for Water, because the SDG 6 on water is largely off track. But we can say all SDGs are off track because water is the connector and water is essential for life. So we need to ensure that the youth Africa are really accelerated to accelerate the SDG 6 in Africa. We can accelerate their knowledge by empowering them. And this is what this is all about. We need to encourage the curiosity. We need to empower them to use science and technology. We need to empower them to access scientific breakthroughs and innovation in the spirit of open science. I would like to sincerely thank you. This call for extended abstracts on water, security, youth in Africa builds on all our collective efforts during the 7th Africa Water Week in 2018. We look forward to working with all of you. The 50 extended abstracts that were chosen need to be extended across the continent. So my challenge and my appeal to all of you, today we speak about 50 extended abstracts. Can each and every one of you empower those youth as a chain in Africa? Let's promote the water youth chain in Africa so that when we meet next year, we have multiplied it by 10. Let's promote this transmission of water safety and security in Africa and empowering youth. I thank you very much. We're looking forward to working with you. And I want to say that we really need our youth. We need our women. We need the whole of society. We need the young professionals. Africa is thirsty for change. The answer can be used in using science collectively and inclusively to address water security, partnership with the youth, and in partnership with all young professionals. In the words of Kofi Annan, any society that does not succeed in tapping into the energy and creativity of youth will be left behind. So this is really the aim of this initiative that is brought together by AMCAL, by ISC, and by our regional office in Africa. Thank you very much, Antes, Regional Director. Thank you, Jaya, and the team in the regional office in Africa, in East Africa. Thank you to Nicole Webley, to all the technicians, to Abu Amani. Thank you to AMCAL, and thank you to the youth in Africa. The future is yours. We look forward to working with you. Thank you very much, dear colleagues, and wish you good deliberations today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, ADG.
Thank you.
So I suppose I come in.
Well addressed.
Not easy to do it after inspiring Chamila. And I have to say that not easy to do after all these wonderful partners. Of course, the regional office in Kenya, but also the ISC regional office and Mr. Canisius. And I'm really inspired by this initiative, and I'm very glad that you also invited us, the social science sector, because as Shamila said, there's nothing that will not bring together the more core, hardcore science with the human. And this example of what you are launching today is very clear in terms of relying on youth to provide with some answers to one of the most challenging issues that we have, as many of you have underscored. And of course, big thanks to our UNESCO Nairobi's office, and of course to put youth at the center. I'm really excited because as you all have said, is not only a question of identifying a very complex and challenging issue, which is, excuse me? If we can mute our mics, please. Is not only the question of finding solutions to a very great challenge that we are all facing. And we know the importance of water when we know that the most effective tool to counter the current pandemic is just to wash your hands. We have seen how much this really means in places where there is no sanitation and there is no running water. And therefore, putting these things together is not only a major undertaking for a long-standing challenge, but it's also acquiring a new dynamic in terms of the challenge we are facing. I'm very glad that the social science, the social and human sector is also focusing on youth. And this element that you brought in terms of mobilizing the youth knowledge and mobilizing their capacities to provide with innovative solutions is really welcome. You know that we have the Youth as Researchers initiative because we believe in the UNESCO world. This is something that all the sectors share, and our DG is supportive of it. Is that youth, of course, are a generation, is a group of people that we all need to care about. We need to care about because, of course, they are still in their formative years, We need to invest in their education. We need to invest in their opportunities. We need to invest in their well-being. And this is all the more important when we know that the COVID pandemic is really going to take a very hard toll in their well-being, not only in terms of the education disruption, not only in terms of the fact that they are always facing higher risk to be unemployed, not only in terms of their perspectives and their income, but also about their mental health. And many of the sagas that is following up from this pandemic. So yes, we need to care about them, and UNESCO is very strongly putting a voice to have in all the recovery packages that countries are putting at the table to counter the pandemic. We are calling to have a very strong youth policies, to invest in youth, to do not forget that the recovery needs to be people-centered. But at the same time, I feel is this perspective of not only supporting youth on their development, on their well-being, on their understanding, on the investments that we need to do for the youngsters. We are also very proud to understand and to promote the idea that they are agents of change. That is not an assistantialist vision that we are going to promote, but something that partner with them as equals. This is in line with our operational strategy on youth and the youth strategy that recognize the agency of young people, their role as societal actors, leaders and change makers, as well as the potential for partnership in implementing our work in all our fields of competence. And you are proving us right in the sense that bringing these two elements together, the scientific knowledge to address a very complex challenge, because the water challenge is not only a developing country challenge, it's everywhere. Of course, in Africa is acute in terms of scarcity and in terms of infrastructure, in terms of financing, in terms of sanitation. But the reality is that water is a must everywhere around the world. But putting it together with youth, you have this very fantastic outcome that is delivering today. And I want to quote, actually talking about youth agency, Anna Golden from Ireland, who said, it is important that young people are involved in researching issues that affect us, because we understand and experience these issues ourselves. And I feel this is very important. We cannot patronize youth, we cannot patronize people. I think we really need to hear what are their propositions. And when you think that among all the participants in this very important project, you have a 17 years old and a youngest co-author that is only 13 years old. So do we have any doubt that they have something to contribute even from the youngest age? I really think that this is an amazing initiative. And the 4 blocks of action that we have advanced, which is the knowledge brokering, partnering with academia, with development actors, where youth can generate and share knowledge is an important one. Looking for policy solutions, whereby we partner with member states to propose youth-related policy options, to promote youth-led action, where we take targeted activities on enhancing young resilience and effectively recognizing and engaging young people, as I said, as young change makers, as solution drivers in addressing societal challenges and crises, and particularly on the impact of climate change. When you see the youngsters that are manifesting in the streets now, is no longer possible because of the lockdown, but I was always encouraged to see the very strong voice of all the young generation in the streets claiming for better solutions on climate action. I feel that this is really something we need to take into account, and also take into account that in our youth agenda there is always a space to give room for girls, to ensure that girls are not left behind, that whenever we propose options and when we propose programs to advance youth well-being, that we always include a gender angle. And I'm very happy to see that many of the participants are also girls. And then the capacity building, whereby we work with governments at different levels to strengthen institutional capacities to deal with youth challenges, particularly regarding capacities of policymakers and development actors, as well as capacities for intergenerational dialogue and cooperation. So this workshop lies at the intersection of all these efforts. And I'm very glad to see that it aims to reinforce youth capacities while building intergenerational partnerships. It puts the scientific contribution of youth in the spotlight to inspire again other youth people to become more involved in the co-production and application of such knowledge. There's nothing better than the sense of achievement. And with this partnership, we are providing everybody that is participating this sense of collective achievement to solve one of the most difficult issues that we are facing now. So without further ado, I'm really glad to join you in this endeavor. I thank you for inviting us. I think that's, as we say, is great to have this the science together. I joined Shamila to protect the right to science. We have a recommendation on that to push for open science and to search for scientific solutions, because we know also that science is under a lot of pressure, and scientists are also under a lot of pressure when you have the rise of populist and the streaming of false fake news and misinformation. So I'm very pleased to partner with all of you. I'm looking forward to the outcomes of this program. I think you will be pioneering a model. I hope that we can almost bottle this model and promote it everywhere, because it brings together so many good contributions that we need to learn from it and push it forward to other areas and to other very important agendas that we need to deal with. So thank you very much, and good luck in your debates.
Yeah, thank you very much, Edis. I'm really sorry. There was a power issue in my apartment. The power went off, so my internet got disconnected. So I'm really very much sorry for that. I mean, I really thank you, both of you, coming together and addressing all our young colleagues. Thank you so much for your contribution. And the next session, I mean, before moving into the next session, that's a technical session where Professor Hilary Inyang will address to the youth group. We would like to have a kind of a group picture with all the panelists, so that, I mean, we could switch on our cameras. All the panelists can switch on their camera, so that, I mean, we could take a group picture. I think our colleagues in Paris, they are taking a group picture.
Yes, just waiting for like the rest to open their cameras.
Okay.
Perfect. So I'm going to take like 2 or 3 photos. So I will start now. 3, 2, 1. Another one, please. Okay, just one last. Sorry. Perfect. All
yeah,
set.
thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, the team.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, our
Thank
panelists. Yeah, thank you so much. And we
Thank
know
you,
that, I mean,
Gabriela.
you all are busy.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you,
thank you so much.
Thank
Now,
you, all of you. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you very much.
Stay
thank
safe.
you.
Great.
Stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, now for the second session, I would like to invite Dr. Shailesh from Kenyatta University, who is part of the International Science Council researcher, to introduce our guest speaker, the Professor Hilary Inyang, for today. Please, the floor is yours. Can you please unmute your mic? Dr. Shailesh?
All right, thank you. Thank you very much to everyone. I hope you can hear me loud and clear.
Yes, very good. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Before I begin, I'd like to give my sincere appreciation to the panelists. I think for someone like me who works in water and sanitation, this is very exciting to hear. And I hope the attendees are also very excited for the next session that's coming up. So before I really get us and introduce the panelists, not the panelists, but the presenter, I'd like to engage the attendees for just 1 second. If this was a physical meeting, I would have asked us to stand up and do some stretches and walk around just for us to be active. But because we are not physically together, I'd like us to just pick at least one word that we can pick from all the panelists who have given some very useful contributions. Just pick one word, or at least 2 words that you've heard, and put them in the Q&A box. Anything that has jumped into your mind, just pick it and put it in the Q&A box to the attendees quickly in just a minute or so. That is our mind activity for now. Anything, the attendees. I can see some of them coming through. Encourage intergenerational dialogue, great. Another one. Empowerment through research, great. Another one. Come on. That's someone saying thank you. Any other person? Open science for policy, youth empowerment, water, youth chain. That's really, really interesting. Gender into consideration. I like that. Any other? Sustainable development. Thank you, Maud. Okay, as we continue with that, I also would like to ask the attendees to please enter the title of your abstract and your email address in the Q&A box. Please do that now. And I'm asking you to do this because this will encourage you to have a better idea of the different topics that are being researched, and so that we can contact the researchers directly if you find their research topic interesting. So kindly go ahead and enter your titles and email addresses in the Q&A box. Attendees, please just go ahead and enter your titles and email addresses in the Q&A box. I can still see the words coming through. Now let's move on to entering our titles and email addresses in the Q&A box. As we do that, please allow me to introduce our professor, Professor Hilary Inyang, who has served as the US Ambassador's Distinguished Scholar to Ethiopia before the COVID-19 break. He's a former Duke Energy Distinguished Professor of Environmental Engineering and Science and Director of the Global Institute of Energy and Environmental Systems of the North Carolina, Charlotte, USA, DuPont Professor of Environmental Engineering and Science, Director of the Center for Environmental Engineering, Science and Technology of the University of Massachusetts, USA. He's also the President and Vice Chancellor of the African University of Science and Technology in Abuja, and President and Vice Chancellor of the Botswana International University of Science and Technology in Botswana. He has authored and co-authored more than 272 research articles, books, chapters, federal design manuals, and a textbook. And he was also the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Energy Engineering of the American Society of Civil Engineers, and associate editor and a member of the editorial board of 33 refereed international journals, and contributing editor of 3 books, including the United Nations Encyclopedia of Life Support Systems. Professor Inyang chaired the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's Environmental Science Board for 2 terms in Washington, and served on the U.S. National Advisory Council on Environmental Policy and Technology, Effluent Guidelines Committee. From the year 2011 to 2012, he chaired the steering committee of the African Science Plans under the auspices of the then International Council for Science Regional Committee for Africa, which is now the International Science Council, which is the Regional Committee for Africa. He holds a bachelor's, a doctorate degree with a double major in geotechnical engineering and civil engineering materials, with a minor in mineral resources from Iowa State University in the USA. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the pleasure of inviting Professor Hilary Inyang. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Silish, for a very long introduction that is longer than my lecture. Thank you. First of all, I am very grateful to the three organizing organizations for this very important workshop, the training workshop. As you know, there are about 6 major areas of focus for any country that wants to take any economic sector to move along. And that includes water resources or water security, as you may describe it in a more comprehensive way. And that would be number 1, regulations. Number 2, policies. Number 3, technical guidance systems. Number 4, research and data management systems. Number 5 would be economic incentives, market incentives, and then there is enforcement, and then finally international collaboration. So in terms of writing by any of the trainees, and I thank you all for coming, and I'm very excited that such a large number of trainees are online. This provides the context for writing, because you need to know about the utility of your contribution. Now, I will move very directly to the lecture because we don't have a lot of time. And I'm very happy that opportunity is there for asking questions. And I'm also happy that this lecture, those that I will gloss over because of time, can be presented to you all trainees directly as an email document. First of all, what is the coverage of this lecture? The water security knowledge sector, how large is it? What are its components? Introduction to critical thinking. One cannot write unless they think well. You can't write well unless you think well. Authorship of a research report, which is essentially different from the authorship of a journal article. Writing style and technical English. And I should put a caveat here, because sometimes you are not writing just for a technical journal. You may also be writing a policy document, and that is a little different. Then there is the issue of ethics and plagiarism, and then I will conclude and then await your questions. The water security knowledge sector, what are its components? Very important that when any trainee in this broadcast is trying to write an article, you have to ask that question. What socioeconomic sector are you writing for? Who are likely to be the readers? Meaning that you need to know the scope of that field and where your paper sits. Components of water security. Of course, there are 5 major recognized components. First, there is the area of domestic water security. That is very important in Africa. As you know, the Assistant Director General of UNESCO mentioned about some numbers, the percentage of water systems in Africa that are inadequate. So most of those in Africa tend to be encompassed by the domestic water security issue. Then there is the resilience to water-related natural disasters. In Africa, like in many other places, there are some floods and so forth. In Africa, unfortunately, the capacity to address some of those hazards is not as high as in other parts of the world. There is environmental water security. Environment has an impact on human health, ecological health, and so forth. So we have to look at that context as well as you write your paper. Where does yours fit in? Urban water security, water treatment systems. This is an era of terrorism where water systems can be poisoned and so forth. Then there's economic water security. Without water, a lot of the industrial systems that are in place in many of the advanced countries would not have taken shape. In Africa, it's the same. Water is needed to support the socio-economic development programs of countries, factories, and so forth. Now, let's look at water in terms of utility. There's drinking water issues, economic activities and development I've alluded to just a moment ago. Then there's ecosystem support, then water-related hazards and climate change. One cannot forget climate change. Climate change is intrinsically tied to water quality and water quantity, availability, and so forth. Now, let's move on. Analytical needs in water security, because most of the trainees who are online right now, you will be writing papers and bringing out new knowledge. There is a lot of utility to what you do with the papers you're writing. Is the paper an analysis? Is it framing a policy context? Is this an assessment of circumstances? So these are the three major groups of papers with respect to needs that one has to try to put his or her paper in context. Analysis will require certain routines and certain methodologies. Framing as well, you may be identifying a need, a problem, issuing a policy solution. And then you may also be assessing the nature of circumstance, be it financial circumstance related to water quality, be it disposal, how the water quality indices disperse in time and space. How do circumstances vary by location? So this is an example. Sometimes the United Nations develops an assessment of the water quality indices of certain jurisdictions, be it a continent, a section of the world, a country, a region, and so forth. So this is the context by which you can frame your papers. Introduction to critical thinking. Ultimately, writing a paper for a journal, proceedings, or a report, or national technical guidance document, all are based on critical thinking, logic, and a lot of those things. But these are the recognizable aspects of intellectual standards that every writer must, by necessity, indulge in. Clarity, the paper has to be very clear. Could you elaborate further? For example, there is a language in certain fields that may not generally be well known to others who are reading from the general public. So clarity is very important, and some clarifying statements may be needed in such articles. Then there is the issue of accuracy. Accuracy not just in numbers, but accuracy in statements. The statements that are formatted, do they represent the truth? Then there is the issue of precision. When you are quoting a number, how precise is that number? Is it so many points deviation from the true number, right? So that is very important. And precision is not only an issue of numbers, but an issue of qualitative descriptions as well. You can make general statements that fall on their faces when applied to certain circumstances. So an analyst who is writing for a journal or any of these other outlets must be very precise. Then there is the issue of depth. How deep? Sometimes just a summary is enough, but those are rarely published in journals and may not account as deep technical articles or deep policy articles. So for a journal, depth is often the norm. You have to write in detail, intricate details, in order to expose the new knowledge that you are creating. The breadth, what is the coverage? Now the coverage is important, not so much as to making it a specification. Sometimes you'll be writing on a narrow technical subject or a broad policy issue. So you need to know the context, what your focus is. Are you trying to write for a larger audience or trying to explain a policy, in which case often it is very broad, or you are trying to deal with a very specific technical challenge in water quality. It could be, for example, heavy metals in drinking water. That's very specific, and you need to be specific. Sometimes it can even be more specific than that. You may be writing about arsenic in groundwater. You may be writing about selenium in groundwater, and so forth and so forth. So you have to know what you're writing about. Then the logic, the connection between sentences, the connection between thoughts, the connection among them if there are more than two. The logic is important because more often than not, you will be judged by the logic of your paper. What leads to what? What can you conclude on based on your data, based on your methodology? How adequate is your methodology? Is it logical? Significance. A lot of folks can write papers on things that are of very low significance. In other words, significance has to deal with the utility of what you're writing. How much does that contribute to solving the challenge that has been identified? That is the issue of significance. And sometimes going down to the scale that is even deep. How does what you have discovered, no matter how important to the subject, influence circumstances outside? Often that is what is used to judge certain contributions in science. As you know, be it the Nobel Prize, it is not just the advance of science, but that science has caused an impact, a certain impact, high utility to the advancement of circumstances in this world. In your own case, of course, you're focusing on advancing water security in Africa. So there could be some relation. Sometimes those show up in the introduction to the paper, sometimes also in the conclusion, as the case may be, as we'll see a little later. Fairness. How fair is the paper? Are you, in essence, do you have vested interest in the results of this research that you are publishing that you've not disclosed? That can skew the conclusions towards items of interest to certain parties. That is not an acceptable form in science and even policy as well. So these are the universal intellectual standards that you all have to try to keep to as you write your article. Then there is a scientific procedure. What is really the scientific procedure? And I say scientific procedure not just for physical sciences. When you use the word science, people tend to think that that is limited only to the physical sciences and engineering. That is not true. Social science is a science as well, as far as it involves certain procedures, certain methodologies in investigation. It is a science. So in the early period in research and when science took roots, down to the days of Aristotle, the process was you observe a phenomenon, and then you compare and contrast the observations, and then you summarize the observations. In Aristotle's time, science ended there, but more modern scientific protocols involve more steps. First, there is the observation and description of the phenomena. You observe what is happening. You formulate an hypothesis about that to explain that phenomenon. And then you experiment to try to determine the extent to which that hypothesis is true, because you have then to use results to try to validate and verify that. You repeat the experiments to test predictions at several independent checks. When those independent checks come out to be true and compliant, then you have a new method. You have a new system. You have one that can be accepted by the generality of the public or that core that support that discipline. You are to do this in water resources as well. Sometimes not all the steps, because sometimes the papers, like I've seen, are focused on experiments, sometimes on policy, sometimes on modeling. And these are different types of research approaches, each very valid. Now, when you do, this gets to the core of what we're trying to do today. When you do have new ideas based on your research, based on your analysis, based on your review, You must find an outlet, which is what you're trying to do now, like the very noble Assistant Secretary General of the Assistant Director General of the UNESCO mentioned that one has to publish, and also like the Executive Director of AMCO mentioned, you have to publish. You have to find outlets for the very private information or methodology that you have. What should be the outlet? I have listed most of those outlets here, the majority of them actually. You have newspapers and magazines. Those are opinion aids. You have heard about those. Those are just for the general public and do not have very strict requirements like you do in a scientific journal. The next one, which should really be your target as young researchers, is journals. Journals. A good researcher must write in journals. Research opportunity announcements, activities of agencies, most value, an intellectual must value and indulge in intellectual activities, critical thinking, curiosity about phenomena and processes. Sometimes research is done with intent, initial intent and just curiosity, but it germinates into something else that helps society. Respect for rationality and knowledge, multidisciplinarity and cross-disciplinarity. Most of the issues in water resources are not going to lie in one discipline. They may not lie just in chemistry. They may not lie just in biology. They may not lie just in environmental science. So there are issues, and those issues are cross-disciplinary. So sometimes they require a multidisciplinary approach. And things that tend to be at the frontiers of science, including water science, tend to be cross-disciplinary. You will see molecular science there. Sometimes it deals with dissociative chemistry. Sometimes it deals with quantum mechanics, even in water. Supposing that one wants to do electrolysis of water, as one of the things, one of the methods around for cleanup of certain types of contaminated water. You cannot avoid quantum mechanics because you are, in some cases, bombarding water molecules with things. And the theory, the mathematics, come from a very esoteric field. So the researcher in water resources has to come in and be prepared to look at other disciplines to help solve problems and to borrow methodologies from other disciplines as he or she writes for a journal. That will show the extent to which that method is advanced. It's taking advantage of the existence of knowledge in other fields that support that paper. Suspicion of traditional methods. One should not always look at traditional methods as a constraint. Look at them, but challenge them. That's how advances occur in science. So I'd challenge those methods, debate and discuss, and find rationality before you adopt a system. In terms of where you would like to disseminate your methods, your results from research, this publication, you can do lecture forum, you can distribute a research report. A research report is somewhat different from a journal article, as I will explain a little later. Engagement of agencies, the private sector. You also have to be very present in the internet. You have heard, all the trainees, that productivity of Africa in science is very minimal. What is the basis for that? The basis for that conclusion is the representation in ResearchGate, Google Scholar, Mendeley, Academia, Scopus, JCI. So a researcher who is on an upward trend must make sure that his or her articles show up in these outlets because they are being used these days to scale professional strength in employment and to scale contributions for prizes, selections for graduate school, selections for postdoctorate positions, and so forth and so forth. So please, the trainees, you need to take note of this. ResearchGate, Google Scholar, Mendeley, Academia, Scopus, JCI. Use those regularly. Check on them. Check your own scores on those. Avoidance of plagiarism. This is a thorn in the flesh of academia. Even as budding researchers, I implore you to stay away from plagiarism. Always change the sentences. Get the knowledge and express things in your own words, in your own sentences, because plagiarism is a career killer. Most of those who have been accused, in fact, even the accusation itself will be a debt on you as a researcher and as a writer, because people will always doubt the veracity of your work. They will doubt the authenticity of your work and feel that you are copying all the time when once you accuse once and it is proven. So never lift paragraphs, because these days there are software that can identify plagiarized paragraphs. They connect the words and pick them and identify that is plagiarized. So plagiarism, those of you who are not very strong in English, is taking some other person's work without citation, without referencing, taking that person's work as your own, expressing the same thing and sometimes sentences. So understand the phenomenon, understand the process, but do things in your own way. I have to give way. In terms of type of research approaches, there are three major research approaches. First, there is the policy methodology type of research. It's an evaluation. You review warrants for the approach. You review the historical development if you are writing, obtain all supporting references and analyze them. Analyze scenarios, because the policy context is often much broader than the modeling, the narrow modeling context. Now, the second type is the modeling and simulation paper. You have to analyze the event of the phenomenon. You have to assess their continuity, plot the spatial-temporal distribution. Spatial-temporal distribution means what you are modeling may change in time and space. Does your model capture that? And then often, modeling involves certain processes, certain laws. And there are three very important mathematical techniques that the modeler must know. Any modeler, as you are boarding out now, any modeler that knows these three important techniques, will be a very good researcher in the future if he or she isn't already. You need to know physical laws. You need to know similitude. Similitude is a relationship between natural circumstances and the scale model. So you can represent a phenomenon using the constructed phenomenon. What is the ratio of parameters between the real one and the one that you are constructing? That can be held by the mathematics of similitude. Empirical curve fitting, you can't escape that in the water resources arena, because things are always related to things and plotted to find correlation coefficients. And then there is the experimental approach, which is test and see. The experimental approach is mostly test and see, often in the laboratory, but not all experiments are in the laboratory. Some experiments are non-physical experiments in water resources, testing things, testing whether flood water will rise and cause this. Causative factors in things may not always be experimental. You may even not have the opportunity to do experiments, but use observations. For example, you do not determine when rainfall will occur. You monitor it. You don't set parameters for some natural phenomena. You monitor it. So the experiments you have, if you want to have the complete factorial, must be such that you wait a very long time for certain things that are natural to occur in such density to satisfy your interest. So this is why we cannot rely in the water resources only in the experimental realm. There is modeling, there is policy, formulation, there are predictions, and so forth and so forth. Now, what is the problem here? is not moving. Okay, now categories of outputs from performed research. There are, of course, several types of outputs from the research you perform. What you have done so far is mostly for this journal that UNESCO is going to put together, the journal articles, but you also have conference papers. You have poster articles that have much less constraints in terms of specifications of depth, content, and format. Then there is research final reports. There are communiques and briefs that are often to either your superiors or to the general public, and there are advisories and recommendations. For example, if there is a contamination somewhere, water system is contaminated, some researchers at the research institute may be asked to write an advisory to be released to the general public. You may also write recommendations to policymakers. So output from research, output from analysis can come in very many different ways. And then there are innovative processes. There are codes and standards that you may produce from your research. There are patents, for example, in the area of water treatment, in the area of writing codes for water quality assessment or for drainage of a city. Sometimes there are opportunities for patents in those areas. Methodologies can also come out, so others can use the methodology to solve problems. Then there could be also tangible products like computer programs, new equipment that is designed, for example, desalination equipment for removing salt from water, water treatment equipment can come out of your research in the water security sector. New materials for treatment, absorbents that absorb contaminants from water, for example. Manufactured objects too, prototypes can come out of your research. So research products are in various categories. Now let's go directly, with very little time that we have left, go directly to authorship of research reports. Typically, you need a format. You must follow a format. This format is not a specification. Sometimes there are modifications. They may be specified by the agency that sponsored the research, or the specification could be the style that an agency adopts. For example, UNESCO may have its own report style and format. IAC may have its own report format and standard, and the African Ministerial Council on Water can also have those. But they tend to contain these essential elements. These are the basic elements of research reports. So first, the introduction. If it were a journal article, it would start with an abstract first. But research reports generally do not start with abstracts. They start sometimes with background or introduction. Now, the first thing, the topic and purpose, obviously that must be stated. The problem that had to be solved has to be addressed in the introduction. The theoretical framework, you are not to get into the theoretical framework in any detail in the introductory part of these reports. That is for later. Then you can make some statements, a few statements about the hypothesis or research question. Then what is the scope of this study? Every study must have a scope. It cannot be so general as to apply to everything. Then what is the significance? And what are the limitations of this approach that you are attempting? And these are all sentences that are well crafted without so much verbose, not making it so verbose. The next thing is literature review. The purpose of literature review, some writers often forget, is to lay the foundation to look at what others have done and how what others have done relate to your own work. It's not just a general literature review for the entire field. The literature review must be very relevant to your topic. You do not review chemistry. You do not review biology. You do not review things that are outside the realm of your own research focus. You want to look at what others have done, what the deficiencies of what they've done are, what the challenges they address, how they address those challenges, and what yours your proposed method is likely to add. Because at this time, you have not written your paper yet. You are still in the introductory stages. It is at the end, when you discuss your results, that you really go deep into the utility of your own results, because you don't have results yet. Now, the third part then is the design and method. Methods employed. What methods did you employ in your research? What were the variables tested, the parameters? I've seen a lot of papers as editor in which people never put this. We outrightly reject such papers. We don't even read it long. We throw it away because the researcher has not given details on the methods, the variables that were to be tested, and now they are significant. And if there are field work, like is the case in water resources a lot of times, what was the sampling method? What about the spacing of samples in time and space? What instrumentation was used? Mention the brand of the instrument. Say a geotest equipment model N7 was used to do this test. Very important, because anybody trying to replicate it must know the precision limit of the equipment and try to get that equipment, find out from the manufacturers what the features of and capacities of that equipment are. Then data collection. How did you collect the data? Sometimes somebody has to go out to the river. Did you use a boat? How did you grab sample? How many samples did you take? What was the volume of each sample? What was the techniques of data analysis, techniques of verification, and ethical issues? Now, number 4, data analysis and interpretation. That is where a lot of papers get rejected, because the person may collect the data from either experiments or from the field or from previously accumulated information, but cannot interpret it. The interpretation falls short. The interpretation does not address the topic, neither does it address the central thesis of the paper. Okay? And what also helps in the interpretation is the follow-up discussion and conclusions. This is where you say things about the nature of your contribution, the validity, the significance, the improvement on existing methods. Because by this time, you do have your own results. You have many, many plots that help you make the determination as to the extent to which you have satisfied your hypothesis or you have made advancement in the field. Of course, there is bibliography or reference list. Bibliography tends to deal more with research report, because bibliography means that not all the papers that you have listed, all the articles that you've listed in the bibliography need to be cited in the main body of the paper. Your bibliography reflects all of the materials that you read in order to write this report, even though you have not cited some of them. That is not the case with a journal article. With a journal article, every paper that is listed in the reference section must be cited in the main body of the paper. So that's the essential difference. And sometimes research reports, and most of the time, let me say that, most of the time there are appendices. Appendices may be charts that are too big to be included in the main body of the report. They may also be forms that you use to collect data. They may be, in some cases, diagrams of equipment and many other things like that that don't necessarily have to be put in the main body of the paper, but may be important in verifying how solidly that work was done. So that is the advice on the authorship of final research reports. Final research reports are sometimes also a compendium, an edited compendium of previous reports. Because if you are doing sponsored research, like IAC has some grants, UNESCO has some grants, and AMCO may at some point have some grants. As you take that grant may be a 2-year grant, it may be a 1-year grant, but there's usually a requirement of bi-monthly reports or quarterly reports, periodic reports. So you are writing as you get along as to the extent to which you have gone towards finishing that project. And the final report itself must reflect some of those. Not necessarily all, because circumstances and data may change along, but you have to explain and you have to note the fact that you also did that. Let me rush and go to authorship of journal articles because the time is running very fast. I have 15 minutes. So in terms of authorship of journal articles, there are some very important things to note. Let's begin by choice of journal. Choice of journal is very important. The author needs to know what the focus of that journal is, even within the discipline. Not all journals not all journals in a discipline focus on the specific interest area of the author. All these journals have their own heritage and what they have historically covered. So it is the responsibility of the author to find out what that journal has been publishing. Look at older editions of the journal and look at it. Look at the format of publication. Look at the types of articles. Look at the comments by reviewers, sometimes the editorials that cover what they want to do. And the most important page to look at for each journal is what we call the masthead. That is that insights page that lists the editors of this journal, the editorial board member, the aims and scope of the journal, the objectives of the journal, and read very deeply the format requirements and instructions to authors. Sometimes they don't have those instructions to authors in any edition of the journal. They have it at a website. So you follow that website, download the instructions, and then get an sample paper, a sample paper from that journal that had been accepted before and published, and then start your own manuscript. There are general rankings of journals in the water security area. I have provided it here. I provided it here. You see the top ranked journal at this time using many scales. There are many, many scales. This is just one example, a very comprehensive example. The top one at this time is water research. It tends to have a lot of chemistry in it. So if you are a researcher and you are working with chemical analysis of contaminants, water contamination and so forth, this is an important article, an important publication outlet. But let me warn that their standards are very high. So it's only very excellent papers that they will accept. As you can tell from that score there, that score is hierarchical. It starts from very high all the way down, down, down. So the top ranked one is water research. The next one is environmental science and technology letters. They say letters, but there are also very dense letters that have numbers and all that. Typically, very experienced researchers write for this journal because they often give perspectives in some scientific field, some scientific issue in water resources, and that takes a lot of experience as a researcher. Now, so hydrology and aid system sciences, that is broader in scope. That is much broader in scope. So all of you who are in the floods, natural hazards, in areas such as climate change impact on water resources, that is an outlet. Number 3 would be an outlet. Number 4, this actually provides you with the opportunity to write papers without necessarily performing hard-on research. This is writing of reviews, but those reviews are often up to 30, 40 pages. So it is just a light review, they will not accept it. I've been a publisher in that journal, but it's of very high ranking. Everybody rates it high. If you are a researcher and during your physical research or modeling, you have accumulated a lot of articles and advances in the field, in the topic of your interest. You may write a journal article to this journal that is basically a review of the methods that you have accumulated, and make it very dense, make it very comprehensive. You will have the chance to publish in it. I recommend it very highly for those who want to broaden their scope in a field. That lets you read, and read very broadly, but also very deep, to be able to appreciate all the scientific issues on the topic. Now, desalination is also a good one. Water resources research. In this journal, you have to be very deep in mathematics, because this is often mostly about modeling of water resources outside. A lot of people who model river basins, who model floods, who model all of this right there. It is very important that anybody who submits an article there, must be able to do mathematics. So I'll move away from that and go very quickly to other things so that we can conclude. There are many other papers, journals there that I've listed. In terms of authorship, abstract, some journals specify format and length. So note that, don't exceed. If you exceed that, the paper may be rejected or sent back for rewriting. Typically very brief, avoid literature review in the abstract. The abstract is not a place for literature review and commentary. Focus on your findings and discoveries, often in very quantitative terms. If you are doing a physical science article, provide quantitative information. If research is on experimentation, briefly include a few sentences on the methods, materials, results, and significance. Don't write expository there. You write very, very sharp sentences, often single or double sentences on an aspect, to keep within the length requirements. Now, introduction, I have mentioned this before. They're about the same for journals as they are for research reports. Focus on the issues, processes. Begin with historical development. Vary the citation style. This time you may write, David Brown, 2018, discovered XXX. Don't do all like that. Don't come again and say, Jennison, 2018, discovered this. This discovered this. Sometimes vary the citation style. It was, in bracket, Denison Brown, found out in 1985 that water quality can be affected by incidents of floods. You see, vary the citation style. I don't begin always with the author and the year as the beginning of the citation to make the paper balanced and nice to read. Avoid the use of too many diagrams from another source. When you use other people's diagrams too many times, it gives the impression that the work is not yours. The work is dominated by the other. Make reference to some diagrams if you may. Don't put too many of them in the introduction, unless you are writing a research report. A research report, that's fine. But for a journal, that's not fine. Concept development and modeling approach. Provide detailed analysis of the modeling parameters and relationships. Some people write only descriptive in models. If the model is a mathematical model, don't just describe it only in words. Use equations, use mathematical expressions, and number them appropriately. If they are not numbered well, or certain parameters, this time is T sub V, the V is small letter, but in another equation, the V is a large letter. We'll throw it out for inconsistencies and confusion, because once the letter size is not the same, you may be meaning something else. You see, for a paper that is it's very dense in mathematics, you have to be very careful. There are software these days to use to check those things. State the significant processes to be modeled, state the bounds of the model, and illustrate equipment. If the equipment is custom made, illustrate that equipment, draw that equipment, because that equipment is not available in the open market for people to know the model and go Google the website. Draw the one you've constructed for this research, if the equipment is novel. Test method, state clearly what the test targeted are. Use past tense. Don't use present tense in English grammar when describing experiments that were performed. Experiment, 2 teaspoons of salt was put in a glass of water. That is the right language, not we put. Don't put your possessive terms in the sentences. We put this. No, 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 that's not allowed. It was put is the right thing. It's more passive, not active. We put. All right. Present the hypothesis and experiments. Mention equipment models as I have stated. Now, also, if necessary, use flow charts. Use flow charts to show the natural progress of steps that you took in your analysis. Yes, this is always very helpful, as they say that a picture is worth more than 1,000 words. See, this is an example of a flow chart that shows analytical steps. So this helps a lot and gives high quality to your paper. Then analysis of results. This is intended as a discussion of the significance. What is the significance of your work? Compare your results with those of other investigators with citations. Use statistical analysis. Don't just say it was greater. He was greater by how much? Huh? He was lower by how much? What was the average in numbers? What was the median? What was the standard deviation? And all of that. If you do some correlations, you say something is related to something. What is the correlation coefficient? We want to know because articles that are of high quality tend to have numbers that describe relationships. Then in terms of conclusion, do not repeat test protocols and experimental design and concepts. In the conclusion, just state the key findings, brief sentences, often single sentences or no maximum of 3 sentences on a point. This is to convey what you have discovered, deficiencies in other systems, what you have proven, what your recommendations are as well. So these are the things that one has to know. In terms of analysis of results, what are the tools? There are several tools. I will not go into them in detail because they are described in standard textbooks, but I will mention them here. The first, you have tests that are for differences among groups of parameters. T-test, analysis of variance. Their protocols are well described in textbooks. Then the second is tests for associations among groups of parameters. This is very common in water resources because water resources research has a lot of parameters. They can be weather parameters, they can be terrain parameters, they can be water medium parameters, they can be practice parameters, and many, many others, cultural parameters. So sometimes it is necessary to establish relationships among them all. And the types of tests that are available for that are the chi-square test, regression analysis, and correlation analysis. An example of a correlation analysis is this. You see, the person is now showing the relationship between the prediction and the observation. Prediction, perhaps using a model of the type that I talked about earlier, how you form a model using similitude and so forth. You have predictions and you have observations. And then the dots, like shown, the red and the green and the blue used. Now, we need a relationship between that. It doesn't mean that every single parameter point does satisfy that, but we want the general trend and an equation that we can use for approximations and predictions. So we do a correlation. You see, for blue, the correlation coefficient is 0.65. For the data in red, it is 0.62. For the data in green, it is 0.72. So what this shows is that this line that we put in as the correlation line, it is more accurate for the green than for the other two colors. You see, we can make those statements in the conclusion of our research to show that we really do have some numbers that can be relied upon by those who want to use the results of the research. Then And other ones are measures of central tendency, median, mean, measures of spread, range, ratio, quartiles. A quartile, for example, is 25% of the samples that we took exhibited contamination. That's an example, right? And then measures of variability is also very important. I don't have much time left, so I will use the next 2 minutes to just go through some of the visualization. What is visualization? When you write an article and you have a lot of data and you have explanations that are very, very dense, sometimes use of a graph, a picture, speaks more, allows things to be appreciated, allows the results to be appreciated, and allows a model to be appreciated by the reader, by the editors, by the reviewers more. So there are examples of such plots. And such plots are XY plots, bar charts, pie charts, three-dimensional plots, three-dimensional surface plots. I'll just quickly show a few. These are some of the types of plots that help. There are software these days to do this. So one just has to learn the software. I suggest that many researchers in Africa use these softwares. They never do, and that contributes to inability to publish in the very high quality journals that value format, like science, like nature. You have to use these high quality plots to illustrate things before they accept your article. Sometimes they will help you too. So these are high quality plots. Some of them are three-dimensional, some of them are two-dimensional, but they help a lot in representation of circumstance and results. We call this visualization. Visualization. They help a lot. Then let me conclude by saying that in journals, you have to be careful about the language. Do not get into detailed analytical aspects where you are not supposed to, because you will disorganize your paper. Use technical language and good grammar. Use non-possessive and personal terms. Not, I found in 2010 that brown is green. No, previous research yourself and Dawit, for example, 2010 indicated that brown is green. That's a technical language and not a possessive language like the first one. That is often not accepted. Sometimes the mathematical journals accept that first format. I found that by computing this. But mostly in the water resources and general engineering arena, passive terms such as the second type are acceptable. The previous one is not. Be consistent in referencing styles. Look at examples from other documents. Yes. Then we provided some bibliography here that will help all of you. And I'm very happy that all of you, including very young authors, are engaged in writing. That is the future of Africa. Water resources is a very broad area. It covers from policy to science and engineering to marketing to financing. And I wish you good luck as you've already started your career in this writing business. Thank you very much. I'll end here so that questions could be asked. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Inyang. I mean, it's an eye-opener for all the young researchers. Thank you very much for your excellent presentation on this writing skills. I mean, it's very much appreciated. My colleagues are collecting all the questions and they are putting it in Q&A window. I think if you could open it and you could see the question and answers, and then you can respond to the researchers.
I can directly see them, so it's excellent. It's an excellent scheme. So the first question, which is from Kaizen Lin of UNESCO. The question says, I am turning from Indonesia. I am a young lecturer, and my question is how to prepare a manuscript for international journals. For international journals, if you look at the later half of my presentation, the steps have been provided. I think you may have asked this question before my presentation. I'm sure that with a copy of this presentation, you'll be able to get the guidance on it. Thank you very much. Then the next person is Mr. Carlos Macandia. I am Carlos Silos Macandia, a statistician, research analyst with African Researchers Consortium in Kenya. My question is on how we will go about manuscript and how the funding will come through. My response is almost identical to the one that I mentioned, but you've added a stint, a flex on it, which is funding. To get funding, you have to write research proposals. You have to write research proposals. There are very many avenues for research writing, research proposal, grant writing in the water resources these days. I can just mention a few to you. The African Academy of Sciences runs a research grant program. And many national agencies also run research programs. So I suggest that you write to ProFellow, not the word ProFellow, and they often publish such opportunities. You can also Google directly in the internet, grant opportunities in water resources, research grant opportunities in water resources, and quite a lot of resources will come for you. You can download them. And some of them have deadlines that have passed, but most of them are annual. So you will be able to take advantage of that. Now, the next one is Kaizen Lin of UNESCO. What are the basic elements that need to be considered while preparing research publications? Again, this was asked before my lecture. The basic things to be considered are, number one, what type of article am I writing? Am I writing a policy article? Am I writing a technical article? Am I writing an advisory? Another thing to be considered is what is the format and author instructions for the journal. You take a look at that and make sure that you know what they are. So you don't write an article that will be rejected because their focus is not in that sector. Another one is that you look at, if you may, the success rate of authors to that journal. Those are typically published. So you take a look and see their acceptance rejection record. So that's very important. Another thing to note is that, is this a journal that loves mathematical expressions and so forth, or is it one that will take policy? Make sure you take a look at that. Look at the list that I provided and check those journals out, especially those that are in the top 20, the top 20. The next question is from Akwasi Sapong, and I suspect it's from Ghana. Kwapong, Ulti Foundation, Ghana. Artwork, paintings, animation, songs, types, from among others, can they be considered as examples of outputs from performed research related to water security behavior change? Yes, it can be. Water resources research or publications are not limited to science. There is the policy aspects. There is products, as I mentioned earlier. There are patents. For example, as you've listed some of them, animation, songs, drama, stage plays, those are all products. They are all products for which you can have patents. But usually the ones that work the best are those that have descriptions, because it is from the descriptions that the general public will be aware. If you match the descriptions with the product itself, then you can really advertise them, because there's got to be some description of what you are producing. And the way you format that for an art is very different from how you format research research products that are more conventional. Now, the next one is what are the basic elements that need to be considered while preparing a research publication? I have answered that previously. The next one, what are the basic, the next one, keep going, please. I am Souflen from Algeria. For an article in a review type, is it necessary to add the word "a review" in the article title? Yes. Often, many editors will require that you do that for a review article so that they don't confuse reviewers and readers. So often you may write something like contaminants in groundwater, typical contaminants in groundwater, fluoride in groundwater, or water quality indicators. Often the best form of that, the first format is usually you have that title and you have a full column, a review at the end. Or you may directly also write a review of groundwater quality in India, for example. So this is the nature of that. Yes, it is very true that the word review should appear there. Otherwise, reviewers may misjudge your article, thinking that your article was supposed to contain original elements, and they don't. And they will unfairly grade your paper. The next one, yes, I agree, but it's true that second and last co-authors have the same importance in comparing with others except first author. Yes, the first author is usually given the majority of the credit for a paper. So as a young researcher, it is very important that you try as much as possible to be the first author of a paper in which you are the primary investigator. I didn't say principal investigator because it means something else in academia. Principal investigator is the person who got the grant, usually a senior researcher or some researcher who wrote the proposal, got the grant. Was he designated as the principal investigator in the grant? But when it comes to writing the paper, if there is a student who did most of the work, the senior researchers these days tend to say, okay, you go first because you need this, because they rate first authors in ratings higher than the second or third authors in credit when the issue is credit for the paper, especially for a young researcher who is trying to make a name. It is very important that you be the first author in the majority of your papers, but don't just be the author of papers alone. Combine with others so you can also be a second author or a third author in some of those. But when you take your career and your beginning, you need to be the first author in the majority of your own papers. The next question is a full manuscript allowed to include some alterations compared to the previously submitted extended abstract? Yes. If you wrote a paper and the paper comes back with accepted but rewriting required, accepted but modifications required, at that time you can put all the things that are missing that you didn't put. If they see it as not meeting requirements, they will get back to you until you are able to. The editors will send it back to you, even for a third review and rewriting. So yes, don't leave articles or things that you found later out of the paper just because they will say, just because you didn't have that information at the beginning. Yes, it is usually accepted. Then the question from how best can an upcoming author completely avoid plagiarism? Some say it's very difficult. What's your take on this? It is not difficult to avoid plagiarism, even for a new author. Plagiarism is so dangerous to the author that it can destroy his or her entire career. You avoid plagiarism by two methods. First, understanding what that author wrote, and then you try to incorporate or cite it with your own words, After you try to cite it or write your own words, your own understanding, if you don't have enough English, you can then get your paper to somebody who knows technical writing, who can help you modify it. That is not plagiarism. That is allowed. sending your paper for English checking is allowed. You are still the author of the substantive part of that article, not the reviewer who helps you with English. So, but don't use the excuse of difficulty in trying to write a paper by getting word, verbatim, word by word, in a paragraph or so. Don't do that, because it's very dangerous. You will be found out, because these days there are software for checking plagiarism. So that is my response there. The next question is, does an article focus on one idea or many ideas to be combined? An article can focus on one idea or can focus on a composite idea. It is possible. But when you are focusing on a composite idea, identify the architecture of that composite. Say what the components of that idea are, so that the editor and the reviewers can identify them and know how you are putting them together. Sometimes ideas are complementary, so they come together. They come together before they work. Concepts come together before they work. Some concepts that don't work alone effectively, when combined with other retinues, they will work. There are some that are like that. In fact, you may even have more than two at times work. For example, if you are doing a water quality assessment, you know that a model that predicts rainfall patterns will have to work with river flow, right? There's a model for river flow, but if you take river flow alone, what happens when it rains and there is dilution of that river? The water quality will change. So we may try to combine a model that is hydrological from rainfall and one that is river flow on the ground, surface water hydrology, and combine both to predict water quality. You see, that's an illustration. So sometimes two models have to be combined. So it doesn't have to be on one model always. Then the next question is, please, could we have some open source analysis software for water science? There are many of them, yes. There are many of them in literature. All you have to do in this kind of thing is to Google open source water quality software. And then they will split so many for you. Some of them are very simple, some of them are complicated, accepted that some of them you have to pay for, but there are others that are free. Just Google that, you will get that. Now, the next statement, the next question is, do we need to go on the field, do analysis and collect data? Not always, not always. It depends on the topic of your research. If you are saying evaluation of surface water quality in Uganda, obviously, you will need information from the field. There is no way you can evaluate water quality in Uganda without going to the field, unless you are writing a review article using accumulated data that others have accumulated. But if you are doing a project in a particular jurisdiction, that is a town, a street, a watershed, any of that, you have to do field work to get original data. If your work is about original data, yes.
Yeah, Professor, we are running out of time because we also have interpreters. I mean, they have the fixed timing. I think the rest of the questions, I mean, we can put it in an email and share it with you, so that, I mean, we could answer everyone, because there's a lot of questions are one by one it's coming up, and there's a lot of interest.
Yes.
And then, but at the same time, we also need to be considerate with the interpreters, because their time has finished, and otherwise, I mean, otherwise they will just leave, and there is some little issues with that. I mean, so I think we can stop here with the question and answer. And thank you so much. I mean, thank you very much for your time and answering everything with little patience and with your, I mean, for your stature. I mean, to come down to this level to answer everything, I really appreciate. I mean, thank you so much for your efforts in explaining, in explaining to our young researchers. Now, without further delaying, I would like to request my colleague Nicole from UNESCO IHP Secretariat to give the way forward. I mean, from here, I mean, where are we going? I mean, I think she will give, maybe she can take 5 minutes. Nicole?
Thank you.
Nicole, can you start? Nicole, we can't hear you.
Oh, Nicole.
Nicole, we can see your slides, but we can't hear you.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Please, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. As Jaya said, I will be taking you through the next steps following this workshop. So the next steps are really simple. The first thing you will do is review the presentation and resource materials provided by Professor during this workshop. And after you've done that, you can decide whether or not you'd want to partner with more youth or an expert in the field on the abstract that you submitted for the call. Following this, you can finalize your manuscript and submit it with the submitter information and declaration of consent form that we provided you with during the original call for abstracts. Once this is done, you submit your complete manuscript to the email address on the screen, which was the email address that you used to submit your extended abstract. And following that, the manuscripts will undergo a rigorous peer review process, and we will select the top 25 abstracts. And the top 25 abstracts will be published in a special issue on youth and water security in Africa. And this publication will be made available during Africa Water Week and the World Water Forum coming up. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nicole. That's fine. I mean, now maybe you can separately send an email to all the researchers, those who have responded, how they have to modify and all the process which is involved in submission of the full paper. Thank you very much, Nicole. Finally, I would like to invite Mr. Adriano Giuseppe, who is the Chief of Eco-Hydrology and Water Quality and Water Education Division of IHP. Giuseppe, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jaya. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Very good.
Very well, very well. I will be very brief. Well, good afternoon, good morning, good night for some others who are connected from far away. Thanks for the honor to deliver some of the closing remarks on this online writer workshop. But before doing so, I would like to thank our ADGs, Shamila and Gabriela, as well as the director of Nairobi office, UNESCO Nairobi office, Anne-Therese, our partners, Canisius, Daniel. I would like to thank the authors and all the colleagues, but also I would like to give a special thanks to Professor Hillary for this outstanding presentation on the approach to authorships. And following my participation in today's workshop, I'm filled with hope and great enthusiasm that the authors will succeed at completing their papers thanks to the topics covered by Professor Inyang's presentation, which covered, as said, a lot of different topics: critical thinking, research reports, writing style, technical English, and also thank you so much for having responded to all the answers. And I know that you will be busy later on also to respond by writing, because these are very, very, very important things. Your presentation, I think, has enlightened us all, also who has less experience, also, and who has more experience. And I'm very happy about that. As you know, as was told before by our ADGs, the interest and commitment of youths and young professionals and experts to collaborate and to conduct research on youth and water security issues in Africa is clear for all of us. And when we consider also the 119 extended abstracts that we received from the call, I also had the great opportunity to have been one of the editors of some of the papers, and I was very surprised of the good quality. Of course, there are a lot of things to be arranged, but where are not things to be arranged at which levels? So I think your presentation was extremely important also because it looks apart all the thematic framework, how to get to write a proper article, not only from the scientific point of view, is also how to find the solution, what to propose, because we can do, of course, some descriptive science, but what we're looking today is at the solutions. So proposing solution in an early stage of our researcher's life is extremely important because we learn along the process. And also, let me say that on a personal note, long time ago, more than 30 years ago, I started my career as a young researcher in Southern Africa. And I still have very good memories of the research we have done and the way we had worked all together, us European at the time, and with our African friends, and since then we still have contacts of that period, and we did great things, and I'm really confident that after this your presentation, after this workshop, we open up ways to better collaborate in all the way. Anyway, thanks again to our partners from the International Science Council and the African Minister Council on Water, AMCO, for co-organizing this call for extended abstract. And we're looking forward to your continued support for the publication of the special issues on youth and water security in Africa. I would also like to thank all our colleagues in UNESCO, Nairobi, and in Paris for their contribution toward the success of this call for the extended abstracts. And also thanks the reviewers among UNESCO colleagues and external experts of the 119 abstracts that we have received. And let me also thank the interpreters, the technicians, and our colleague for the technical support here in Paris. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Jesupe. Thank you very much to everyone.